good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I am Evan Matthews, joined by my co-founder Adam Martin from NerdiVERSE, and I am super excited to have a bunch of the key team members here from the Nuclear Nerds, one of the coolest projects that I have seen in all of this craziness that we call the kind of Web3 world. But as many of you know, the point of this event this weekend is really to put the NFT side, the Web3 side, of course, it's kind of a critical component to the project, but to put that a little bit of background and also really shine the spotlight on what a cool world and universe and storytelling experience you guys have created around the Nuclear Nerds. So before we get into all of that, I'm going to show a little video that you guys gave us to show. Everybody check this out. Awesome. Well, the future of IP development is here. So guys, why don't you introduce yourselves real quickly, just kind of what's your role in the team and in the project, and we'll dive into it from there.
I'll start. I'm Hot Shave, and my role in the project is that of co-founder and the dummy who writes a lot of the words.
Love that.
But DC and I have been long-time creative partners. We work together in advertising. We have basically an unfortunately long history working in advertising, telling other people's stories. And I think what ended us up here was just really, really wanting to tell our own story, along with a bunch of badass community members who hopped on board.
Yeah.
I am DC, also known as David Carter, co-founder, co-creator of Nuclear Nerds with Hot Shave. As he mentioned, we're longtime creative partners in the ad world, and now we are creative partners in this NFT world. And I would say I'm generally responsible on the Nerds project as far as conceptual ideas, and I work very closely with Adam on the art and the design of everything.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
I guess I'll go. I'm Melissa Burr. I am the, operations person, I guess you could say. I run the social media, most of the social media, and I keep these guys in line in terms of deadlines and strategy.
Excellent.
Mama Burr.
The linchpin of the whole operation right here.
Yeah, and lastly, I am McClunky. Got involved early on with the project, do just a lot of odd jobs, Discord, socials, kind of help out wherever help is needed. So
McClunky's a bit of a handyman.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, we saw the video, but who wants to take the role of kind of just telling us about the world, the universe, the kind of what you guys are building? What's the foundation of Nuclear Nerds? And I guess if we kind of combine that with the secret origin story of, how did this all get started? Where did this come from? And then what is this universe that you guys are creating?
Well, do we have that presentation, or are we going to have to wing it, Hot Shave?
I've done everything I can in regards to the presentation.
This is the nuclear apocalypse. The presentations don't work in this.
Remember, rule number 1: the apocalypse requires flexibility.
Exactly.
DC, do you want to start, and I'll chime in on the backstory?
Sure. So, well, I'll go back even further, I guess, to I got involved in the NFT space probably in early 2021, and I sort of got there in a roundabout way. Hot Shave got into crypto before I did and was telling me about it, and then I got into crypto a little bit, and then I discovered this world of NFTs and was doing a lot of research, and I loved the creativity of the space. And at a certain point, because Hot Shave basically spend our days looking at each other on Zoom all day with our day jobs and consulting and whatnot. And I sort of dragged him into the space with me, and we were like longtime storytellers in our day jobs. And I think we've always pursued writing scripts, and Hot Shave wrote and directed his own feature film. So we thought there could be we thought NFTs would offer a unique way to tell stories. And so we jumped into it with the idea that we would use NFTs and the blockchain to tell a narrative story. Once we sort of decided on that, then it became what was the idea for the story that we wanted to tell. And maybe Hot Shave, you want to jump in and talk about how we ended up with Nuclear Nerds?
Yeah, boy, I don't know. I mean, we auditioned a couple different ideas that I don't think anyone wants us to dig out of the treasure chest.
I desperately
no, it sounds great.
Chest.
But,
It's part of the process, right?
One of the things, I don't know, it was a kind of a big amalgam of a bunch of different conversations, but I think one of the things I think that was always on our minds was one of the things we've always wondered is what would a Pixar movie look like if it were R-rated? As I think one of the things that sort of led us here. And I think we always love post-apocalyptic stories. We're both huge fans of Mad Max. I'll never forget seeing The Road Warrior. And then someone told me that there's an even earlier movie called Straight Up Mad Max or whatever. And I think we love all things post-apocalyptic. We just sort of love the genre, the kind of, I don't know, weirdly fresh start feel of a post-apocalyptic world. One of my favorite books of all time was The Road. So I don't know. I think we were looking for something that felt like it would have enough of broad appeal and would allow us to just draw really amazing shit. And we were fortunate enough to find an artist by the name of Adam Archer. And we initially engaged him to just do some character designs just to see. And his art was so fantastic. We were like, this has to be the art. And so we just started kind of really developing the story. And just this hypothesis, I think, that that the world was ready for a story that could be co-created by the audience itself. It just sort of felt like with the rise of social media and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and everybody's got a phone in their pocket that'll let you make a film or do whatever you want. It just felt like such an amazing, the time was right that with the advent of Web3 that we could figure out how to pull off a project where we could get a bunch of people together and tell a really cool post-apocalyptic story. I don't know, sort of a terrible.
I think one of the interesting things for me that we talk about a lot is before we did Nuclear Nerds, we built up a audience on Instagram, and it was just called Let's Bazooka, which is sort of where the name Bazooka Labs came from. And it was all about
sort of.
Sorry, yeah. It was all about creativity, from our experience in marketing and all that. And the gist of it was everybody is creative, and everybody, I think, has a desire to be creative and wants to make cool stuff. What happens is, to some degree, if you give somebody a blank piece of paper, if you're not an artist, it's paralyzing because, oh, well, what do I do on this blank sheet of paper? But we know that there's a large swath of people who do want to be creative. And so by creating a project like this, we're not giving somebody a blank page, but we've created this world, we've got these characters. And so you can, rather than staring at a blank page, you can look at this, if you bought this NFT of this particular nerd and they've got this kind of weapon and this kind of clothing, you can start to bring your creativity to develop who that character is and how they experience this world. And as we, got into starting to write the actual story, there are not many people who can sit down and write a great story from beginning, middle, and end. But there's a lot of people that have a lot of great ideas that if you just put some story prompts in front of them, the ideas just start flowing, which we've seen as we've progressed through now, I think what is 4, 5 comic books. Only 3 have been released so far.
I think I'd say one of the interesting things we've learned is sort of the art of the prompt a little bit. Like a couple of things we've always tried to do with the prompts is from the jump try and make them meaningful so that they're meaningful contributions to the story. They're not just like tertiary things that don't really drive the narrative. But at the same time, we've also worked hard to kind of create prompts that can lead, I guess, people who maybe don't feel super creative to be creative, to like kind of hit us with some left field suggestions and things like that. And, those are ultimately some of the best moments in the comic so far, are some of just the random suggestions people throw out, because it has this kind of, let me say the hive mind is super powerful, because we created an outline for the story, but as people fill it in, they come from such different backgrounds and experiences that you would just never come up with some of the thinking that the community does. And we were always, we're like, we don't know if it's going to work. It's going to be an experiment. But we've always said from the jump, like, we have been surprised and so heartened by the creativity from the community that participates in the storytelling part of this project. It's making for a really interesting story. And I guess I'm a little surprised, but I'm also, I always thought it was possible. I just, glad to see that it's happening.
It's amazing to see it working. Yeah. I want to come back to the community storytelling piece, because I think that's so cool. And it's one of the things I've really also fallen in love with in this space, and kind of what the promise of a lot of the both the technology and the ethos of the Web3 space provides. But I also, like, what did you give people to start with? Like, we kind of get the very basic premise of, nuclear apocalypse. These guys are in the basement. But then what did you give people as kind of like, here's the outline, or here's this playground, here's this world? How did you initially start, both engaging the community and kind of what the story would be, but also you must have had some concept of kind of the overall structure of the story, or not really? Like, how far along was that when you got started, and what did you give to the community to start with?
I'd say we had a structure. I think we intentionally tried to break it into, it's 13 chapters, but ultimately it started as 12. We created a prologue based on the opening accidental apocalypse, but we always felt like part of the hope with this project is that we can extend it into film and television. And television's usually a 12 episode season, and a film's usually 7 to 12 sequences. And so we thought having 12 effective chapters that were concepts of how the story progresses, that we would lay out individually to the community one at a time over the course of 18 months was sort of the loose structure of the idea. There's the backstory.
Yeah.
It's in the presentation, and it's on the website, but there's, we created with Adam a story roadmap, and you can sort of see where all the different 13 chapters play out across this wasteland adventure, is one aspect that we put out in front of the community. The other thing is that we feel like, as we all know right now, the NFT space is very small. And if we want to grow the NFT space, then a project, and hopefully Nuclear Nerds and many more, will find enough escape velocity to sort of propel out into the greater world, so that the greater world will say, wow, this is a really interesting story. Where did it come from? And bring more people into the NFT space. And then it just becomes a flywheel and the space grows. Which is one of the reasons why. So as we're going through this story with the community, we're creating these comic books. And, you know, if you hold them side by side to a traditional comic, they're shorter for a number of reasons. One is we want to get them out quickly so that the community can see the fruits of their labor, and it's sort of a proof of concept. Like we're writing, here's the prompts, here's the votes, here's how they end up in the comic, and that all happens relatively quickly.
Right.
So the comics, in a way, are not the be all, and they're not the end product.
Yeah,
they're just a proof of concept for that greater world to say, wow, we could turn this into X, we could turn it into Y, we could turn it into, you know, whatever. So it's really just the comics are sort of a blueprint for a larger story,
Right.
Not the end product themselves.
mm-hmm.
And you've said now a couple of times, I'd be interested to dig into the kind of dynamics between how much of the story you had really, obviously you've got your roadmap, you knew kind of the broad strokes of where you're going, but within any one episode, what's an example of the prompts you're giving the community, and how much did that affect the overall, like, you know, the overall branching narrative from there as well?
Do you have one of the prompt handy there, Hot Shave?
Well, I mean, so like, I think if you go back to the beginning, like the original chapter 1, which was sort of where we meet the gang, or the two protagonists, which are Zeke and Jelly, we basically, some of the prompts we asked from the community are like, we've met these two kids in their basement, like what's their names, like what's their relationships, where are their parents, like you know, we gave the community a lot of latitude to define a lot of the key traits of the protagonists. Also, like the location of the street they grow up on, things that would be visually easy to spot in the comic itself once it gets published. I think one of the things we've learned and kind of leaned into and feel is important is to get as much community material into places where those people that were responsible for that idea can see it, because it ends up creating a stronger connection between the people working on the story and the story itself. And so, you know, in terms of how much do we have pre-written, you know, we have the arc of the season. I think like all aspiring screenwriters, we know where we want to land.
Yeah.
There's more work done on the front half than the back half. The middle, you know, the middle is probably the most ambiguous part, which is going to get exciting because we've concepted 5 chapters so far with the community, and as we dip into 6, we're getting into a little bit of uncharted territory, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
The villains are about to show up. There's all kinds of exciting moments about to happen in the story, and so it's going to get a little more exciting.
Don't forget the reason why they leave their basement is because what ended up the community ended up coming up with and voting for was they run out of toilet paper, which I think is just a great, like,
Yep.
just really fits what we're trying to do.
That's a really good point. I was going to mention that because on the surface it might seem like a small detail, but when you actually think about, like, they have to leave their nice comfy basement for toilet paper, it informs so much of what was going on before that moment and so much of what happens after that moment.
It also informs them as characters, because that's where their priorities are, which is, you know, I think one of the things we didn't mention I think you get the tone of the project from the video, just the juxtaposition of that fucking amazing music against ultimate destruction. It's a little bit this kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it lighthearted dark comedy or a darkish comedy, but like this is always meant to have like, you know, Deadpool meets Zombieland vibes, where it's meant to be funny, a little absurd, definitely entertaining, and you know, its own kind of post-apocalyptic slant, given all the post-apocalyptic stories that are already out there. But the fact they have to go out for toilet paper and the limitations they have on what they will use improvising as toilet paper. Where they draw the line is also in the story. Certain things they will not use. Certain things are okay.
Definitely fertile ground for storytelling. My mind is working right now. I mean, one of the things you guys have done, which I think has been really cool to see, and it's in my mind one of the first examples of this that I came across in the space, is really not only this, kind of community-driven, narrative component to the project, but also you've built a little bit of a platform or some tools, or put some tools together to kind of allow anyone at any time to come and add their own backstories to their characters and kind of add to the lore that way. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about just the interplay between how people contribute to the story that then kind of makes its way into the canon, so to speak, alongside the, you might say kind of fan fiction component to it, and kind of how you guys think about those different elements, and just for my own curiosity, kind of what the process is that you go through as you work with the community to find the right things, so to speak, to actually get into the comics and into the kind of core storyline.
I would say, I'll address, well, actually, Ford, Hot Shave, why don't you talk about the prompt system, and then I'll come back around to the other thing.
Yeah, I mean, so we built a prompt system. It's fairly straightforward. I think we have ambitions to have this thing move at a faster pace than it does, but ultimately it's usually typically a two-month process to kind of go from prompts going out on the website to a comic book showing up that you participated in creating. But it always starts with a handful of prompts. Everyone has a week to respond. We, as kind of like creative directors of the project, go through all the prompts. We take the best ones, we line them up. People come back the next week and they vote. They have a week to vote. The ones that win then get incorporated into a narrative. We have a narrative writer that we work with, who's a good friend of ours. We've worked with on other projects. Terry Rieta, he cooks up the narrative. We kind of go through the narrative and get happy and make sure all the prompts are incorporated and all the best kind of community material makes it in there. We pass it off to our comic book script writer, who's like a long-time comic book guy by the name of Kevin Buckley. And then he gets it all paneled out and properly formatted, because we're jackasses and don't know how to do that. And then we go through it and make sure everything's good on that end, and then we pass it off to, we have a comic book artist in Brazil by the name of Leandro Casco, who's fantastic, speaks limited English but draws really, really well. I think one of the big concerns we had, as a sidebar, was just, we love Adam's art and would have him draw everything. Only problem is he's one man. Ironically, he can draw with both hands, but still he's a separate artist for the comic book. Leandro, he's fantastic, and he rocks through the pencils and the inks. And we've got a guy, Daniel, who does the color, and Flavio does the letters, and it all comes together. DC does a really fantastic job of going through and adding little fun details. We usually make ads because we're ad guys, so all comic books should have ads. We tell people, excellent. The ads all have addresses that you can send away for things, and we always tell people, cool, what's the harm in sending away? You never know what you'll get.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's sort of the 411 on the process, and we just kind of keep rinsing and repeating and running through it.
Nice.
What I was gonna say, which does make more sense coming after the prompts, is because of the way that we've set up the experience, and because all NFT projects basically have a Discord. What happens in the Discord when the community comes together around a story idea like this is that there's discussion about the story. Mm-hmm. And so there are lots of ideas that percolate in those discussions, completely unrelated to any of the prompts. And early on, there's a community member, goes by Dirt Hippie, who, again, based on, he got one of the NFTs that has, it was a female, and she's got this sort of skull-looking sword, and she's got the Route 66 road sign as a shield, which has then been spray painted to say Route 666. And he, in the course of discussion in the Discord, came up with this idea of the Shield Maidens, and all of a sudden, it became like its own collection of characters, these shield maidens who got together as a gang in the wasteland, and it's now become its own story that runs, sometimes parallel and sometimes perpendicular to the main origin story that we're all putting together as a community. And so much so, we're like, the moment we saw it, we're like, oh my God, this is such a great idea. So now, in the same way that Boba Fett shows up like briefly in the Star Wars story, now he's got this whole series of his own, on Disney Plus. That's how we're incorporating the Shield Maidens into the origin story. So in this upcoming chapter, they cross over and we meet a Shield Maiden. And it's brief in the same way that Boba Fett was brief, but now there's this whole other story that is beginning to take shape. And so, giving people this sandbox to play in just inspires that kind of creativity. There's other things that are now starting to percolate too, which is really interesting.
I would just add to that, we always hoped that there would be ancillary stories developed off of the Nuclear Nerds universe. Like we talked about, if we're fortunate enough to be successful long enough to develop an incubator for these Boba Fett-like stories, because I think one of the thesis of this experiment is, can we develop a franchise IP story world faster and more richly than the traditional route, right? Because we're not a writer in a room. We're not George Lucas up in Lucas Valley, like thinking about Luke Skywalker. We're like a whole community of people whose ideas run in all kinds of different directions. It's like the potential that the Web3 brings into the whole deal is that you can do all of these things faster and maybe in more interesting fashion. So it's sort of I guess another one of the surprises is like with the Shield Maidens was these things started to happen more quickly than we anticipated, which is exciting and also like frightening.
It's so cool. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm grinning because the Boba Fett example is the one that I use all the time. So I love there's a mind meld there, I think, in a good way. But I think the fascinating part of all of this to me, and we've done a bunch of work in kind of community story development and a handful of projects too, and it's exactly what you said. Like the thing that has surprised me and delighted me in the best possible way is, the fact that you do have these things which just you never would have thought of. And yet when it kind of springs out of the community, you go like, that's so perfect. Like that's, fits so well. And it's this new, branch or road to go down that just makes the story better. And I do think it's illuminating for, for those of us that do have some sort of background in traditional media where, you don't generally have that happen in that way. And, now there's a real actual, not only system and kind of an organization around, having that happen, but also, the ability for people to potentially see some real return on that participation investment, to see something that they created not only become real, but if it becomes meaningfully real, have some sort of reward for that, which I just think is so cool.
I mean, we could talk to Burr because Burr came up with one of the best, like, what the fucks in our prompts, and like we're in the middle of drawing it right now, and I just look at it every time I see like it's gone from pencil to ink, and it's just like, I'm like, I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought of that in a million billion years. And like, Burr dropped this little gem in there in the prompts and as a prompt response. And I just like, every time I see it, it just kills me laughing because I'm like, this is just what it's all about is like this, like, I don't know. It's like when you watch a great comedy and like, I don't know, like DC and I wrote a lot of commercials and we tried to write funny commercials, and sometimes our jokes were better than some jokes were better than others, but like when you watch a movie and someone drops a joke and you're like, it's so funny, but you could have never got there, you could have never written that joke. So it's like, thanks, like Bird dropped this golden gem in there, and I was just like, that's the reason why this thing is going to work. That's why it's going to work.
And it should be said, we did not know it was Burr when we came across the idea.
That's the best part. The best part of our system is like, and it's also the downside, is is like everybody's, unless you can memorize an ETH address, you have no idea who's submitting the prompts because
Right.
it's just
Right.
a string of hexadecimal characters. And so you're reading the reply and you have no idea who wrote it, and then it's always fun. Like another member of the team, Wes Lilhead, runs these spaces where they talk about the different prompts that people have, the answers that people have given, and then people can go on these spaces and kind of lobby for their favorite answers or why they think an answer is good or where they think it can go with the story. And so it's just kind of these prompt answers, like little threads the community pulls on, and it ends up revealing like new bits of story, which is, and it, like, I don't know if we said, but like the things that make it into the story don't always come from prompts. Like a lot of things that get dropped in come from some crazy thing someone said in the Discord, or offhanded comment on a Wasteland Wednesday, or a tweet. Like that's another surprising thing is, like, we thought it was all going to be the prompts, and the prompts make it in there. But if you're an active member of the community and you post a funny meme, you cook up a shield maiden, you do whatever, like, we're always out there watching, trying to find the most interesting things. And it's just such a great grocery store of material. Yeah,
that's so awesome. So if someone is seeing this or kind of coming to the project now, you've got how many episodes of the comic that are out for people?
4. There are 3 that are currently out. 4 is pretty close, and 5 is in the midst of being written.
Of a planned 13 episodes, is that?
Of a planned 13.
Yeah.
Yep.
13, yeah. Seems perfect for the Wasteland to have 13 episodes, but
it does. It was better when we added the prologue.
That's awesome. So, I mean, of course, we can go and get some nerds on the secondary market. People can drop into the Discord. Is there a way for people to find the comics outside of that at this point, or is it kind of token gated inside the community at the moment?
It's not token gated, and we intentionally did that as well. So, for one, a couple of reasons. One, we felt like the community is co-authoring these comics. It doesn't make sense to then turn around and make them pay for something that they created. Mm-hmm. So the comics were always intended to be free to read for the community, as well as anybody else. Like we want as many people as want to read the comics to be able to read the comics and not have to pay for them. So there are links. When each comic comes out, we put it in sort of spread format on Twitter in a thread. And then we also give a link to people if they want to go, download the PDF and look at it that way.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, there's all kinds of places. There's a link baked into the tokens on OpenSea. So if you're shopping on OpenSea, you want to see what the comic is, you can look at the comic token, and there'll be a link depending on the art that's on the individual comic token. Will take you to that issue. And then they're also available on the website at nuclearnerds.io. But I think it's another, like, we have a philosophy and a hypothesis that is sort of like, I think DC alluded to it at the beginning, but like, we feel like we want to create an asset with the community within the NFT space that can act as a recruiter and kind of an emissary out into the real world to pull new people into the space, because we feel like a lot of projects basically are pulling liquidity from other projects. Mm-hmm. And that can't sustain the space. The space will just eat itself. Right. And so it's like, how do you create something, build your project around a philosophy that allows other people who aren't necessarily into NFTs to get access to something that might bring them into the world of NFTs? So by making these comics available wherever we can, free for anyone to read, not token gating it, not making them inaccessible. If people like the story, then they've been given something that they can actually participate in and actually help drive and help be a part of. And so the more we can get those things out into the world in the places that all the NFT folks don't spend their time, it feels like it's better for the space in general, because that brings more people in.
And don't forget, their names are in the credits too. So.
Oh, very good. Yes. One of our creators says, take them on the ride before you bring them to the gift shop. So I think that's it's a good way to kind of get people invested in the world, invested in the story, invested in the process, and then here's some ways to get more and more deeply involved in the community, which I think makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Melissa, I keep wanting to tell you to shut up, but is there anything you want to add, kind of from your perspective in all of this?
No, I'll just say that the way in which they have gone about this is, from what I've seen from an NFT perspective, one of the most inclusive ways that you could reach the most amount of people for your project, and inclusive in the way that they haven't token gated the comics. They are readable with the PDF, like they said, but that also gets tweeted out on Twitter. All the spaces that Little Old Head drives the discussion for are public facing on Twitter. So even if you are not part of the Wasteland, you could hop into those spaces pretty much on any given time while the comic is being written with the prompts, and kind of just feel around to see what's going on. And the people, the community, I would say, is one of the Wasteland's biggest assets. The community at large, the people that are involved, that love the story, are a very passionate group of people, tight knit, who are looking to bring in more people to further tell this story. They're always looking for more friends. And then those ideas that are getting shared within those spaces are just creating more, and they're just feeding off of that energy. So when you hear why someone wrote something, people that are sitting on 78 or 100 tokens, they're like, well, I like that prompt. But then you hear something like, someone who wrote the Frosty Freaks ice cream truck, I'll give that example. I was not going to vote for that. And then, they created such a visual in my mind about how they spray painted it out, and all of a sudden it was supposed to be Frosty Freaks instead of Frosty Freeze. It was a play on words. I was like, oh, now I understand. Yeah. So the other thing is that I don't think they touched on was, with the comic, the more comics that you collect, and if you upgrade them further and further throughout the story, you also increase your narrative equity and your voting power. And what that would give you just an extra weight towards influencing the story. So if you upgrade one more time, you get to have one more vote towards the story, further influencing it. So there is incentive to be active in the community, but they also layered this entire system to award the passive holder also, because the comics are deflationary. There's only ever going to be 8,999 comics. So with every upgrade, there's an interesting game theory optimal strategy to approach this from a perspective of, okay, how many comics are going to be divided into each chapter? So for me, as a former professional poker player, I love to see how this dynamic's going to play out. How many are going to be of each set? I hold, I think, something like 130 different comics. And in that world, you would say, well, you should hold 10 of each. And that might not be the case, because certain covers might be favored more. And I'm watching the community from a team member's perspective, but also from an investor perspective. How should I upgrade these in which way? So there's so many different fun mechanics within the project. You really could get involved. But if you're a passive holder and you're sitting on a pile of 0 comics, they're only going to get deflated. And you're able to just, see the return on your investment in the long haul. And you don't have to keep up with Discord. You don't have to keep up with everything unless you want to. And for me, as an investor in this space, that's one of the best things, to have the option to be active or not be active.
That's cool. Yeah, I think, so many, thinking about kind of the spectrum of ways for people to participate is, such an important part of all of this. And love the fact that you guys are kind of covering all those bases. So I think, we're going to have to start wrapping up. I think we could talk to you for another hour very easily. But we like to end these sessions in the spirit of the geek world that we all live in now, and in the spirit of storytelling. Adam, what is a Hujima flip? We're going to ask you each for yours, but what is this?
So Hujima flip for us, it's a very English expression, just whatever is top of mind, preferably kind of entertainment, pop cultural, whatever. What are you watching? What are you playing? What are you excited by at this point?
What do you recommend when someone says, like, what should I listen to? What should I watch? What are you enjoying at the moment?
I will say three things. Well, two things. The one thing that that is going on between most members of the team is an argument over which is better or which is worse, which is House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power. So there's a lot of there's a war going on within the team on that. And then the other thing I would say is, I will tell everybody to watch Severance, because that's the best show I've seen in recent memory.
Great show, absolutely
Great stuff.
All right,
I will. I'll chime in and say I just picked up watching all that stuff. One of the one of the best shows of all time that I would recommend is Better Call Saul. What I'm reading right now is I just picked up a book called Life's Work by David Milch, which is his memoir. And he is the creator of Deadwood, co-creator of NYPD Blue, one of the best television writers to ever work in television. If you want to understand better how to develop characters, how to write characters, and storytelling, it is a must-read book because he delves into his understanding of human nature is exquisite. The other thing that makes this book really interesting is that he is suffering from Alzheimer's. So he wrote this book with the help of his wife and his daughter to sort of help him go back and remember things. There's great stuff about, stories that happened on the NYPD Blue set with David Caruso. There's great stories about Deadwood. There's great stories about just the guy was a drug addict, a gambling addict, like his entire life. It's an amazing read. So highly recommend it, just from an interesting read, but also storytelling and character writing.
Very cool.
Somebody just chimed in here. They just got a copy of that Deadwood Bible that both of us have on the shelf.
That Deadwood Bible is also a must read.
It is. It's really insightful from an actor's perspective, because a lot of the different actors are in there about how they approach their character development through the eyes of their director, and there's so much good stuff in there. There's all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. Good recommend.
I have not watched Edge Runners, Elric, but I will shill this book called The Dog Stars, a post-apocalyptic wasteland type story. Unique writing. It's great.
Awesome.
Dog Stars.
Yes.
The Dog Stars by Peter Heller.
Melissa, back to you. What are you consuming these days?
I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to lie to you. I really don't. I wish I could sit down and read a book. I have probably 10 books on my radar that I'd love to read, but I'm going to have to just cop out here and pick Severance and Better Call Saul. I actually was a non-believer of Breaking Bad, admittedly, until these guys basically bullied me into watching all of it. And that's actually the true story. I had only watched the first season of Breaking Bad, and I was like, yeah, it's not for me. And then I watched the whole season, and then I watched all of Better Call Saul, and we just finished the season 6, and it was worth it. And just one more thing, I'm going to shout out Elric, who is an important nerd in the Wasteland, and he's feeling a little under the weather, so I hope he feels better. And he wants me to shout out, McClunky did, shout out Edge Runners, all caps. So I hope he's happy.
Cyberpunk. We love Cyberpunk too. So
all good recommends for sure. Well, so I guess as we wrap up here, where should people follow and find you guys, either individually, obviously Nuclear Nerds, but where's the best place for people to connect with all of you?
I think Twitter, pretty much. We're all on Twitter. Our handles are pretty easy to find, and then certainly the Nuclear Nerds Twitter has all the good deets on the daily.
Awesome. Well, guys,
and the easiest way to find us all is we're all in Discord.
Yeah, we're all in the Discord. We're all in there every day. So we talk to our community every day. So
yeah, that's so cool. It's kind of crazy how we've all found ourselves on Discord, but in the best possible way. Well, you guys, I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us today. I mean, great to learn more about the project and how you're approaching all this stuff. I hope everyone that is either listening to this live or finds it later will dive into the nuclear wasteland and become a nerd, and we'll keep the conversation going from there. But just really appreciate you coming on and everything you guys are building.
Thanks so much for having us. It was fun.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Our
Great.
absolute pleasure. And for anyone watching this may be interested in what's coming up next, which is the Web3 Writers Room and more about community storytelling. So we're going to dive into more of what we've been talking about here with you guys as well. So if that's of interest, stay tuned and more to come. Thank you guys again so much. And we'll definitely talk again soon, I'm sure.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.